Nina, I'm so excited that we're going to be talking about decolonizing work. And you and I have been planning to be talking about whatever for a long time. But you just jumped in when I said decolonize work. And I was like, ooh, you're excited.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you. I am curious about why you jumped in so quickly. Like, what was it about? Whether I don't know. I mean, of course, I'm a lovely person to talk to, but what
Of
made you
course,
want to
of
talk?
course. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much depth to this question, to this line of inquiry around like, what are the other possibilities of thinking about work and sacred service and being a contribution to our human family in ways that are not prioritizing capitalism and economic return. So there's just such a range. So yes, let's talk about it. Let's explore what those possibilities can be, because we certainly acknowledge that a lot of what was right of the traditional systems that we've all been kind of swimming in for the last couple hundred years are dissolving, are breaking down, are really, crumbling in the weight of their own, greed and destructiveness and exploitation, right? All of that. So this is the time for us to be identifying and practicing and experimenting with how we want to redefine work. So I'm always here for the conversation.
And I think like you used, when you said sacred service, I was like, ooh, tingles, because these are words that we hadn't associated with work in traditional ways, right? But there's something about a global phenomenon like a pandemic. I mean, it's been crumbling for a long time. I have clients now that they're telling me about the effect of the pandemic, and I'm saying the pandemic is just showing up what is, right? Yeah. It's not that the pandemic is causing this thing not to work. The thing didn't work. And then the pandemic now puts pressure on it. And so it is, I agree with you, this great opportunity to reframe and redefine. So what does decolonize work mean to you? Because I know all our words mean different things to different ones of us. And I don't think any one person has a perfect definition. I'm never all for the right definition, but what's it mean to you?
Yes, I feel like it means a release, number one, a release of what the previous definition was, and our release of our attachment to that idea, and how we then attach, right and wrong and good and bad and all of those kind of equations to those imaginings, what this whole story that we made up about like what work looks like. So the decolonizing, I think, is like two parts, right? First, there is a release, first there is a letting go, and then there is a reimagining. And the reimagining kind of centering in a space of what liberates us in our creativity, in our service to one another, like you said, around like the sacredness of being of service to other people. I cannot claim that comes from one of my spiritual teachers, Michael Beckwith, but he often talks about like, coordinating your life around your sacred service. So you are here on the planet with your unique set of skills and strengths and locations and privileges and all of that, right? Like, how do you utilize that in service to humanity to move us forward? And so I think that, for me, that decolonization is first being aware of how it lives, how the old systems and patterns live within me, then choosing on a daily basis, because it is a practice, to say, actually, I want to, and, certainly the pandemic gave many of those of us in white collar professions, right, the opportunity to stay home. So now, even given the choice about returning to an office, it's just like, no, thank you. I am quite content where I am, and being able to, be with my family on a more regular basis and know what's going on and be involved in, just the goings and comings of being at home, and the work being flexible for that, so that there really is a prioritization for me of family life, and that my work operates around that instead of vice versa, which is certainly how it was in earlier parts of my career. I think decolonization of work for me also looks like a releasing of the organizational structure, right, of work, of that seniority in the hierarchies, and releasing that identification that my value is based on my level in that organizational structure. And instead seeing my value and my contributions to the organization as infinite, as, you know, absolutely unequatable to numbers of dollars. And I think that kind of practice is really frees me from being from number one, being resentful that I'm not at a higher level in the organization, right? But number two, it releases the pressure of like this striving. Because I watched my parents, who were both first-time college graduates in their families, step into a space of that idea. Once I get that professional job, I am set, and that job is me. And now my family knows me as that job and that position and role, et cetera, right? And yet they were depressed. They were overwhelmed. They were certainly very stressed in navigating those spaces. And so as I witnessed that as a young person, I think I recognized like, what is that getting you? I mean, that's giving you some financial security, but at what cost? So and it's external and internal, right? So I think for me, it's just like this ongoing practice of like releasing my desire, my attachment to the idea that my role is who I am, and that my contributions to that are limited in value based on that hierarchical structure. Like if I can start there to just release those ideas within me, then I can show up. Then I can show up to be more fully of like, actually my value isn't just in my deliverables as an instructional designer or as a facilitator. It actually is in the everyday kind of conversations of like, hey, how are you, human?
It's in my being human with other humans.
Right. Like that's the value. That's what I'm offering. And that kind of ripple effect in the organization, you know, is
can't really count that. So what you're saying something I think is really interesting, because when I think about, you know, some of the ideologies, I don't know, I'm not a history or anthropology person. I'm psychology and engineering in terms of the things I studied officially, right? But I feel like the colonial experience and structure really was tied to this idea of supremacy. Like there's some of us who are more than others, right? And so when we look at the organizational structure, so in my own processing, I'm thinking where, like you said, where are the hidden, like invisible things? It's part of the water, but we don't call it that. Nobody is saying, well, not nobody, but most of us aren't saying I'm better than you. But hidden in the structure of how the thing is designed is the power differential that says some people are more valuable than other people. And those people are both seen, listened to, heard, have voice, and are compensated for their value. And of course, you know, that I have also like a soft spot for disability and neurodistinctiveness. And so it's obvious then that people who can't perform according to the slot that we've given them for the value that we've assigned to them, then they just don't fit in the system any at all. So I love what you're saying about this. We'll just toss out the whole hierarchical organizational structure as a way of it may be useful for organizing units of work or whatever, but as a way of perceiving value that feels really powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Really right. Powerful. And that starts with you. That's an internal thing. Like nobody can control how you perceive value. You get to choose, right? You decide that for yourself. And so I feel like that's that part of the practice of this decolonization is that how do you define that? How do you define your worth and your value? And how can you untangle, right, the threads that we've been given in these inherited beliefs about like it depends on where you are in the organizational structure or in the, white supremacist hierarchy of human value structure, right? All of that. You have to agree to that. You don't, that's a choice. That's a choice making there. But yeah, go ahead.
Do you think there's a role that we have in influencing others' perceptions of value or our value? Because I wonder about, I've released myself, but I'm in a structure that's given me voice and influence based on their perceived sense of value. How do you, what's your thought on how a person can maintain their practice of decolonizing themselves within a structure that needs some influencing?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is, I certainly am still in many organizational systems that are built in that traditional way and do not, the data that I receive from them is not one that I would say agrees with my perspective. And I feel like the more that I am on this journey, I recognize that matters less to me. It matters less. And because I am building and finding other environments in which to be in the similar frequency of those who perceive my value and worth in a way that gives me full autonomy and respects my gifts beyond the job description, right? And beyond what my career says that I am skilled to deliver. Right. So I think that there is some detachment of our needs for recognition from other people in the organization. But then in the sense of if people are if the organization is actually open to change, right. I think that there are wonderful opportunities to help people move along the process, help the organization as a whole move along the process. And that's part of the work that I really love doing in terms of when we think about people development and right. how that influences organizational cultures. Right. And what then is, how do we align what we say we value? Most organizations will agree about things like, autonomy, teamwork, collaboration, right? Like all of these. Yeah, exactly. Like most organizations say those are principles or values that we want to demonstrate when we are here doing this work together. Right. But when it comes down to it, is the culture.
Not in the feet. It's not in our feet. What do we do?
Yes. Right. So there is always growth opportunity there, right? And so this is one of those areas that I think people can be held accountable to. One of the practices that I take on is healthy boundaries with my work colleagues. And so because in the old tradition, right, of being kind of on the mid-level of an organizational structure, if something comes down from a senior leader saying, hey, Nina, go do this thing, right. There is no question, there is no pushback, there is just, okay, I will go do the thing.
Do this thing, yeah.
And that is not how I behave. And right. It is not always comfortable for people when I inform them, yes, if. Yeah, I will do this thing if these other things can move out of the way, if someone else can help me and provide this data, if all these other, right? It is an exchange. It is a dialogue of my acceptance to do the task. And I think that strength or that resilience to say, to be in that different kind of model in the old structure has to be supported outside of the structure. So whether that support is coming from your family or coming from, a network that sees and recognizes and honors your worth, right? So it's not just me feeling empowered to go be the justice advocate in a really toxic environment. I draw strength from the community that I intentionally build outside of that environment in order to keep showing up and pushing against.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is this aspect of who are our people, or it's not our people in terms of even identity as much as there has to be the support, the juice, the lifeblood that comes from people who have similar thought processes that help us I call it a community of practice. And I don't think I came up with that phrase. But in so many areas of our lives, as we build in these new practices, we need communities that are practicing with us so that we can, you know, strengthen our own ability to be in those spaces. And then I love this thing you're saying, because part of what I challenge people about is just workflow. Like, how do we come up with the work that the team is going to do? And then how do we make that work plan flexible enough for humans?
Yes.
Like, these are not robots. This is not machines. This is not, you know, these are humans who are by definition adaptable, responsive entities. So I am responding to the weather. I'm responding to my kid having a difficult night. I'm responding, and then you hand me a thing to respond to, and all of that is adding into the plate.
Yes.
And so how do we build workflows that are also able to be responsive? And so I love you're holding the role that I'm not going to wait for people to build a responsive workflow for me. I am going to hold that for myself. And
and honor it by enforcing that boundary or that belief, right? Or that flow that you need. So there is like this self-awareness about like, what do I require to do my best work? Yep. And if this organization is really paying me, right, and being in this monetary exchange with me about money for my best work, then it behooves them to support me in doing my best work. So that means respecting what I need. That means giving me the flexibility to be in this environment and work from home. That means being able to, you know, to limit the, you know, what's on my plate, right? And what they are asking of me at any given time. Like, as you just said, because that allows me to then deliver what they are really after.
Right. I tell people that inclusivity or inclusive spaces are spaces that remove the barriers to contribution. So like we as individuals have different barriers, things that get in the way of my contributing. Like this is removing a barrier. This coffee is removing a barrier to contribution. And you know, the funny thing is that in these traditional spaces, some barriers are deemed acceptable and some are not. So attending to my family is not deemed acceptable, or you know, not being a morning person is not deemed acceptable. You know, there is somebody, because again of this power hierarchy, determines what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And therefore what's supportive and what's a crutch. And I think part of this decolonization is really us first of all knowing what I need is valid and being in spaces that will support that, and then you know, being willing to kind of hold the boundary like you're saying, so that you give honest feedback into systems, which is why I think the pandemic is giving some honest feedback into systems.
Absolutely, it is, right? And we are responding accordingly because so many of us are at a moment where, you know, it is a breaking point, a breaking of acquiescing to just keep continually deliver to get those outputs higher and higher. Like, it's not sustainable in the midst of working. It can't work. Right. And so it is a necessary breaking point to be like, I can't participate this way anymore. So here now I have my new boundary. Now I have a new defined, definition of what I can and cannot do. And that is good. That's good for us, you know, and I dare say it's good for the economy and our ways of creating organizational, services and outcomes to contribute to our communities. Like, it's good for us to know that we can't just continue on the trajectory that, you know,
we can't, and it's expensive. You know, that this thing that we're doing is also not cost effective. It's massively expensive between the health issues, physical, mental, emotional, and the productivity issues, because if people can't be engaged, then our system isn't working. So there's this massive percentage of, whether it's time or whatever, that whoever is paying for that is not able to be utilized, that some redesign is needed. It is just not, it's not working. So if somebody's listening to this who is HR or like learning, see like head of L&D or something, or running a team that's now down the path that you work in terms of instructional design and facilitating these transformational experiences, and is also thinking about this idea of decolonizing work, what have you noticed are like maybe one or two key things that are important to this process of helping humans, not machines, learn? And the learning is supposed to be something that removes a barrier for contribution. It's not just check a box. Okay, you've done the ethics and compliance thing. What have you noticed in your work that could help that person think about how to decolonize instructional design, learning and development, etc.?
Yeah, I love this question. So the first thing is really about distinguishing what percentage of your instructional design or the intentionality of the learning opportunity that you have is around information delivery, and what percentage is around practice and reflection. And what the learning research tells us is that you have a higher return on your time, energy, money investment in learning opportunities when it focuses on practice and reflection, not on data delivery.
I have to stop you because like I'm just in love with you again. I was in love with you before, but as somebody asked me about delivering a workshop on a particular thing, and I was like, we're going to workshop it as a doing. We're not, because I could give you one of the 5 frameworks I use to design experiences, but that's not the thing. The thing is, you have a bunch of things you want to create, and that's why you're asking me this question. Let's just do them together and figure out what the practices are. And it didn't sound sexy to them when
no, it doesn't absolutely, because we have been trained, the society trains us that what we are in need of is information. Data will fix us, right? Like the whole fashion industry is built on that. The whole, like all these industries, all these areas of our economy, our education system is built on the idea that we don't have certain information. Once we get it, then we will be able to be better, right? Be better humans. And that is not that's not the thing. It's not the thing for actually changing your behavior for kids or for adults, any age human. It's not the thing. So that idea is major decolonization in the workplace, in the school, in academia, right? Like that whole concept of not prioritizing information delivery. Instead, can we gather a collection of humans, or even 2 humans, whatever, into a space and focus on what they need, what you just said about doing this thing together, being in the process of practice, of application. And what does that require? Because that requires a different consideration, right? About like, how then do you use your time? Who do you involve? What kind of beyond intellect methodologies might you choose, right? Because learning in a way of doing requires you to go out of your intellect, because that's not how the human body really anchors in information, right? Like there's all these studies about somatics and about frequency and auditory, right? Like all these other dimensions that we utilize all the time and yet aren't valued in the classroom. And so how then do we cultivate an environment that's going to help people practice the thing to get them towards the behavior change that they are seeking? Absolutely. That's how I design. And I see that it works. It creates transformative, not only in the process of, but in the actualizing. And when people experience that, then they're even more so, right? Like, don't want to go back to the old model of just listening to a lecture.
Like, why are we going to do that? And I think too, that this model that you're describing cannot be done in isolation of the actual humans. In other words, there's a way that as a designer, people will say, hey, can you design a whatever? And I'm like, but I need to talk to the people. I need to be with the people, because there's a way that when I understand that, say you are a morning person and we are having this at, 8 at night, then, and you've graciously said, yes, you're showing up, then I am going to keep that in mind as I design an experience that would be alerting and engaging and supportive for you or whatever. And I think there's so much of this paying attention to who's in the room.
Yes.
That needs to be more of a part of the way we work and the way we design experiences for the people who we work with than, like, okay, a good experience is this thing. And I mean, I'm not recommending this as an effective practice, but I'm known to hand out PowerPoints after experiences, because like, I don't know what I'm going to do. As I read the room, I'm going to respond. And then I'm like, okay, I'll create a slide deck that reflects what I realized.
Yes. After the fact.
After the fact. And I'll send that to you.
That ahead of time. Yeah, I'm with you. And I love that inquiry about like, what do people need? And not just like in the idea of like, I think a comment, particularly as more of us have shifted to online, working primarily online, is the, how are you in the beginnings, and the, okay, well, minimize your distractions, turn off other things, bring your focus right to this one conversation. And that will help you, regain what we talk about, when that absolutely may or may not work, because some brains operate differently than other brains, right? Some brains need that little like, oh, okay, doing this and still listening and still retaining. So it is like an assessment of who is showing up and what do they need. Ask them.
Yeah.
I think most adults can tell you
they can tell you
clearly what they need. And even in a moment, right? Like I feel like I've been in spaces with really incredible virtual and in-person facilitators who do that reading of the space just masterfully, right? Like really being curious and that deep listening about, oh, you're not a morning person. Okay, what would help you in this moment? Would it be a caffeine? Would it be, can we move slower, right? Maybe you need more quiet, or maybe you need more reflection time. Like, what's going to help you bring as much presence and as much energy as you can in this moment? It's not going to look like this other person. That's cool. Like, what's going to support you in what you need? I think those are such powerful questions. And the other one that I often lean into is just an inquiry of sharing power.
Yeah.
How can I share power in this moment? If I am the one who is hosting, a meeting, the training, a webinar, et cetera, like I have the power. Like by definition, the one who defines the space is the one who holds power. So how do I share it? And being curious about doing that in a deliberate way, and not just in this lazy, what questions do you have? I feel like it's just lazy to ask that, like at the end, right? Leaving to the last 5 minutes and being just then giving grace of spaciousness. Like integrate that space, pause intentionally, ask questions of the group that are thoughtful and connect into, how does this relate to your lived experience?
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't. So maybe you're in,
I'm heading off the wrong path. I'm like,
be in the dialogue of that. And I feel like there's such a disservice we do in the traditional mindset of, the master teacher is the one who controls and holds the power through the whole experience. And instead we have missed what Indigenous cultures often practice is the circle. And that everyone in the circle is equally powerful and has a contribution to make to everyone else's knowledge sharing, right? And that expansiveness. And so how do you create space for the circle? This is my inquiry.
Yeah, this whole idea of sharing power is like the example you gave with the question is part of that, right? Because in the old model, there is the assumption that you know what people need. And so when I am willing to ask the question, then I'm saying I don't know what we need. And I'm saying that in a way I have to be working on my own stuff, because like, wait, I'm supposed to know. I'm the expert. I'm supposed to know, because that's the old that thing is in you as well. And if I'm seen not to know, then what does that mean? And will people trust me, and the whole thing? And I think the other side is also true, that because we've all been swimming in this water, we are not used to shared power as much as we want it. So then somebody will say, what do you need? And it's like, what do I need? You should know what so there is this whole transition that we're all going through, where we've been swimming in this water that has this differential, that somebody knows the thing and has centered their knowing as the way everyone should do the thing, and has in that centering determined that they're the one that's valuable, and you, because you're not the expert, you're not. And just being willing to be attentive to all the ways we agree with that. And and I think in Nina, in some ways, it's also being willing to forgive ourselves when we notice that we are agreeing. Because I think many of us, we like, yes, I'm yes. And then like, wow, I just did that same thing, that thing that I hated, that thing that I recognize or whatever. But we have been swimming in this water for so long. What's, the knowing of the new way, whatever the new, or maybe the re-engaging the old way.
Yes. Or even just being in this deeper awareness of how you participate in the current way. Like, can I just be aware? Can I just be mindful? Oh, I just had that doctor's visit, and I gave away my power completely. I didn't ask, I just said, yes, we'll do all the things, right? And like, there is this like re-owning of what we are choosing right now. And like you said, the forgiveness, that is huge. That is huge, because the awareness is growing. And as the awareness grows, we practice grace on ourselves for the previous, choices that we make. Or made in the past, and now have a new opportunity today. What will you choose? How can you gift, freedom? How can you gift yourself liberation in, what you're choosing to eat, what you're choosing to utilize with your time, how you engage with your coworkers, who even that you're being entertained by. Like, there are constant questions of how can I really lean into or choose my own sovereignty instead of just flowing in this water, in this invisible waters that we're in.
This is a great place to end. This is really about choosing, and it's about choosing as practice. And it's about recognizing this moment when I didn't choose, and just being gracious with myself. Like, oh, here's a choice opportunity. I didn't take it. I can take it in the future. Choosing my sovereignty. I love that. Thank you so much, Nina. We could keep going, and we probably will, but we'll just exclude others from our conversation. Your information is going to be in some notes, depending on where people are watching this or listening, so that they can definitely reach out to you, because I think this is so critical. This how corporations are designing experiences. It's a massive entity, learning and development, or wherever the department is called. And so much of it is being done mediocrely.
Oh, absolutely. Even within the old school model, right? Like, all of us have been in those e-learning courses where just like, oh my gosh.
I play them on double speed. I'm just like, okay, I'll just play some double speed while I cook. So yes.
So we can do better. We can absolutely do better. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Nina.